talk about today. I want to talk about Chinua Achebe, No Longer at Ease. So, first of all, this would be a book that I purchased because I read Things Fall Apart by Chinua, and I wanted, it's a classic. He's considered basically like one of the most well-known Nigerian authors of all time. And although he passed away years ago, his work lives on. And so Things Fall Apart is a classic novel about the effects of colonization in Nigeria, the British colonizing Nigeria, and the story of Okonkwo. And infamously in the story, Okonkwo ends his life due to feeling castrated by the society that's erupting, where the traditions that he grew up in, immersed in, is no longer being valued because essentially is either starve and try to keep up with the old traditions of what Nigeria was before it became Nigeria, or if the colonizers are giving you meat and potatoes, but you have to accept their way of life, how long would a society choose to starve by trying to keep their traditions, or choose the meat and potatoes and go along with the invading force who has seized control of their territory? So this story is the sequel to Things Fall Apart. And so in the story, it follows Okonkwo's grandson. And his grandson has accepted the new life. So the book takes place in the 1940s and 1950s, and this young man goes to school in his village, raise enough money from him, and he goes to school in England. And so he comes back and he is now educated. He gets him a government job, and it talks about how his father, who is Okonkwo's son, had a disdain for his father when his father passed away, because he accepted Christianity and was the first generation to abandon the old ways of life. Well, when he does this, it angers Okonkwo. Before his suicide, when he passes away, he doesn't go to the funeral. Later on in this story, it follows the main character and Okonkwo's grandson, and he's going through a thing where basically he has accepted this new lifestyle, this new way of life. He goes to school in London. He comes back, and as a young person, he's talking about how corrupt the old men are and how corrupt the government is. And in the story, we watch him go through a period of where he ends up becoming corrupted by the society, right? And so it follows Obi, it follows Clara, who becomes his female companion in the book, and it's really a touching story. So basically, he ends up meeting this girl named Clara on the way back from London, and the old tradition in Nigeria was that her family was cursed, right? And so later in the story, he falls in love with her and he wants to marry her. His dad is highly religious and a Christian minister. So his dad rejects the old ways of Nigeria, but when he finds out his son wants to marry Clara, who has a curse on her family, the dad is basically in a position where he's telling his son not to marry this girl because she's cursed. And since she's cursed, if Obi has babies with her, and if he, then his children would be cursed, and no one will want to marry them or be with them. So he tells his dad, well, you rejected the old way of Nigeria and the old way of life, and now you're telling me to follow the old way of life. You sent me to school in London to be educated in the way of the British, and now that I'm back and I want to marry this girl, you're telling me to follow the old way of tradition. So it talks basically about how it's difficult for a community or a group of people to fully assimilate into someone else's culture, because they bring with them the traditions and the things that are deeply internalized in the society. So he goes through a thing where he gets back from London, he starts making money, he falls in love with this girl, and now people are now offering him sex, money, in order to 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 get their kids to go to school in London. So he's in a position where he oversees this board that's over scholarships, and he recommends who should get the scholarships. So one day he's in the office, and the man comes to the office and speaks to him in Igbo and tells him that they would like for him to get his sister through, and he would pay the man. And he rejects it and kicks the man out of his office. And then later, the girl shows up to the office herself, and then she propositions that she's willing to do anything in order to get the scholarship, and he denies it. Well, as the story progresses, his situation where he wants to marry Clara, his family's not liking it. His mother is really sick by the time he comes back, and he adopts this new lifestyle. The job gives him a company car. He gets a nice apartment. He has maids and he has cooks, and he's spending all of this money that he doesn't really have, that was advanced to him. He has to pay the village back who gathered the money to send him to school. They want favors from him. He has to. So in the book, while all of this is going on, um, Obi Obi it, Obi is in a position where he becomes a contradiction. So because of his lifestyle and the new pressures that's put on him, he begins to transform, and due to mismanaging money, the pressures of his relationship with Clara, having a house with a maid and a cook, this new government job, the new image he has to put up, he ends up spending more money that he has. Then when it's time to pay back his debt, he doesn't have it. With Clara, he is telling Clara how much he wants to marry her, how much he doesn't care that her family is cursed and the old traditions of Nigeria, and he's rationalizing that his father became a Christian minister and turned his back on his grandfather, didn't go to the funeral. Well, when he visited his family, and he tells his family that, he met this girl and they do research and he's going to marry this girl, his family is against it. His mom is gravely ill and she's really sick by the time he comes back. And his mother tells him that he shouldn't marry this girl, and if he does, at least let her die first. And so he is in conflict and in turmoil with himself and the traditions and the world that he's living in. So he's been sent to England, but he's not an Englishman. He has been learned in this other language, which is English, and when he comes back, it's still remnants of the old way. They want him to speak in Igbo, and he was speaking in Igbo and he started struggling reading it, and he was going through things where they wanted him to, his family, his dad, and the village wanted him to adopt the ways of the British, but when he did, he lost and started to lose part of what made him connected to the Nigerian culture. So Chinua Achebe is drawing comparison to how adapting into this new culture also forces the Nigerians to lose their own culture, right? Well, In the story, he tells his best friend about the turmoil he's going through, how he was propositioned by these different people who wants him to accept bribes, and he tells his best friend that he would never accept bribes. His best friend tells him, hey man, it's all about survival basically. If the girl wanted you to do it, what's the problem? And why would you not accept money? You told them the truth that you don't control who gets a scholarship, you can only recommend. And so his best friend basically tells him to do it. Later on in the story, his mom passes away due to him being at work and him living 500 or 600 miles away from the village that he's from. He doesn't attend his mom's funeral, and his job tells him that they'll give him time off, but he doesn't go to the funeral because when his mom passed away and is so far away that even if he left and he went, it would still be too late. The funeral would have occurred and he would be judged either way. So he stays in this apartment getting drunk. He has all of these money problems. Clara gets pregnant. After Clara gets pregnant, he goes from telling her how much he loves her and how much he wants to be with her, these money problems over his head, and he elects to terminate the pregnancy. After terminating the pregnancy, she doesn't really understand like why they are even together at this point, because his family doesn't want her to marry her, and when she was pregnant he chose to terminate the pregnancy. Mind you, the story is in the 1950s, you guys, and so this is a different era, this is a different time. And so his village needs him to pay back part of the loan that he's from a poor village, and they all raised all of this money to send him to school. They wanted him to start paying back the loan in the future. He gets this advance, he get this car, he's living the high life. He tells him, yeah, I'm gonna pay you back. And then when the time comes for him to start making payments, he doesn't have the money. He goes into this whole thing where Clara gives him some money to pay back whatever loan that he had. He borrowed money from the bank to pay the bills in his house and cover the different expenses. It's really a mess with his finances, and he doesn't want to accept the money from Clara because he feels as though he's the man and he is going to look like he can't take care of her. Then he borrows money from the bank, so he's robbing Peter to pay Paul, as we say. He eventually falls after his mom passes away. Is like the turning point in his character arc. He begins accepting bribes. He begins having sex with the women who are seeking scholarships. He begins telling the different people who should get the marks to go to school in London, and he becomes a caricature of what he said he would never become, which in his view is a corrupt government official, a person who works in the government and is using their position of power to abuse. And in the end of the story, he gets busted for the crimes that he's committing. He gets arrested. He's a young man, and he loses his government job, and he's going to be sentenced. And the story is really a tale about how Obi Okonkwo, who is Okonkwo's from Things Fall Apart grandson, and how his grandfather committed suicide and his father didn't attend the funeral. They accepted the new ways of the British and this new way of life. They accepted colonization. They're trying to assimilate in the culture of the British. And the British who colonized Nigeria, some of them have left and returned to the UK, and those that have stayed, they detest the Nigerians, and at the same time they're practicing paternalism where they want them to be more like them. And when they start following the rules that the Europeans set up, the Europeans are now basically upset that they think that they can even live like the British. Is really a confusing situation because you have the invaders who colonized Nigeria when the Nigerians tried to incorporate the lifestyle that the invaders gave them, the colonizers gave them. The colonizers are upset that the Nigerians are behaving like them. It doesn't really make sense, but it's a great story where it talks about how we should not be so quick to judge, that we should not be so quick to say what we would or what we wouldn't do, because under the right pressures and circumstances, we never know what we would do. And I think Obi's Okonkwo is Chinua Achebe's way of telling the story of from when he was a little boy born in the 1920s or 30s, seeing Nigeria through the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and what was taking place. And if you look at Nigeria now, that's another conversation. I think this type of book like this, No Longer at Ease, will really help understand the West African dilemma, where many Nigerians immigrate to the United Kingdom, Italy, European countries, and many Nigerians immigrate to the United States. And he's basically saying that even in this time, and when this book was written, now this book was written in 1974, in the 1970s, and he's saying like so many people are leaving Nigeria for a better life, a better education, but the result of that is that Nigeria doesn't prosper, that the greatest and best minds in Nigeria are elsewhere. And I'm an American. I'm outside looking out. I'm outside looking in. So in no means am I saying this to disrespect Nigeria or West Africa. I'm just giving my opinion on Chinua Achebe, his book No Longer at Ease, and what he is saying, right? A fellow Nigerian. So if you haven't already, like, share, subscribe. I have other book reviews on my channel. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you have any book recommendations, please let me know. Peace.